What's up, yo? Waiting for the little green light to turn on over there. So I'm chilling here with my buddy Connor McTighe on the one and only OC podcast, the world's very largest Bible-based music business podcast. Today we're talking about God's war. So this is specifically about Satan's fall from heaven and how fighting demons and spiritual warfare relates to being a musician and having a good mentality, knowing your business and being a fighter, knowing how to stand up for yourself, but also knowing how to look inward and be aware of some of your own weaknesses, and we'll get into that a little bit later. So the intro discussion here, we're going to kick it off right at the very start. God's war with the angels, Satan's fall from grace. Go ahead, kick us off here, Connor.
All right. So we actually did a little bit of research for the beginning of this one, and we had to watch a few different interpretations of how this story goes along. But one way or another, it doesn't really matter, because no matter what version of the story you end up reading, there's not too many details. So because there's certain ones that are omitted. So one of the biggest points in the war of angels and demons, essentially Lucifer and the fallen angels fall from grace, is honestly, it's all based around not one specific event per se. It's more so based around Satan refusing to bow down either to God's interpretation of what he sees his grand vision as, which includes mankind, and therefore he insists that the angels and such also bow down to his creation of mankind, and Lucifer refuses to do that. End all be all, he's really just kind of taking a pause and saying to God, okay, that's pretty cool, but let's take a look at it. Maybe we could look at it a different way. And as soon as he decided to suggest that maybe it be taken a different direction, or maybe something else get changed in the little canon of the little, I mean, to an existential being, it would be like a comic book universe. Mankind would be. So as soon as he questioned that, instantly cast down, displaying a big premise of free will, which is something that God bestowed upon mankind, but not the angelic.
So we want to be careful here not to victimize Satan or anything, or hold him up as some kind of martyr, right? Because we're talking a certain type of free will,
yes,
which in moderation, I feel like can be a very powerful tool that we can use as humans. We're all in a fallen state. We're all, original sin and such. So certain aspects of free will can be very powerful, very useful, very positive. We're talking about a guy here who has decided to completely avoid any sense of order, and he kind of wants to start creating some chaos. He wants to mix it up. He wants to bring some negativity and some evil into the world. And so, what we're also talking about today is not just the devil, but his minions, his helpers, and the demons, right? So one of the things that the Bible is very clear about is that one of Jesus's main acts, or one of his main miracles, if you will, is that he casts out demons. And this is in all over the Bible. I got one example written down here, Mark 1. Line, what is it, line 39 or whatever. So he goes throughout Galilee.
Come on now.
Okay, so yeah, he's preaching in the synagogues. He's driving out demons. So we've got, on one hand, we've got the Satan, who's the kind of extreme manifestation of this free will. And then you have Jesus going around trying to kind of clean up the mess and sort of restore some order here. But there's, I think, some very valuable lessons that we can draw from this as musicians, in the sense of kind of being more like Jesus and going against the demons, going against the negativity and the anger and the toxicity in the world, But also remembering that we are human and we are prone to making mistakes and being flawed and messing things up and making things all sloppy, and just not being afraid to exercise that level of free will. So is there anything you want to say specifically about demons in the Bible, or how they're represented, or any other thing like that?
Not anything in particular. I feel like it might detract a little bit too much.
All right, well, in that case, let's keep it moving down. So again, so how does this relate to music? Because this is, again, the world's largest Bible-based music business podcast here, the OC podcast, the OCast for short. So the connection to music here. So what we did was we kind of brainstormed some different kinds of demons that you might encounter in your day-to-day life. So the first kind of demon here is the internal demons. These are the ones that are kind of sneaky. They're kind of stealthy. They sort of sneak in and they sort of take over little parts of your mind and little parts of your actions and behaviors.
And this is something that is not simply applicable to just whether or not you're an up-and-coming artist. This is a thought process that is very relevant for any human person on this planet.
Yeah,
as far as it's not like we opened up the platform speaking about the war between angels and demons before the angels fall to hell. But in actuality, the flip side of that coin is us discussing the inner demons that we battle on a regular basis as people on this planet.
So what we talked about last time was about fear, right? And on the last show, we had a lot of stuff about finding evil and about overcoming your weaknesses, not being afraid to make a mistake, not being afraid to color outside of the lines and, get a little bit messy with it. So fear, the very first internal demon here, probably the most common, the most powerful, the most elusive one. Because one thing I notice, especially in myself, is when I have fear, a lot of times I don't know it. I'm not like consciously aware, oh, I'm afraid right now. It's kind of there, and it sort of locks you in place. It sort of sticks you in place, and you can't move, and you don't know why.
Well,
so,
like you said, it is a very subtle fear. And there you can have fear of multiple things, and one of the main points that we discussed within fear was not just something as simplistic as being afraid of getting on stage or just the concept of stage fright, but there is also fear of even success, the thing that you are actually trying to achieve through engaging in your artistry. You may be just afraid of success, and that you're either afraid that if you're completely just one-sidedly afraid of failure, then there's that. But then there's also you being afraid that you're going to be able to put out some content and it's going to be perceived well, and then your next phase is going to be being expected to top it. So
I think that's a big point there. So maybe we could get a little personal on this. Like for me personally, I've played in a lot of different bands, and there's always a fear when you're joining a new group, or when you're going to record a new song, or you're writing something new, you're starting. Last time we did starting something, right? There's a fear there, not only that you're going to fail, but there's a fear that it's going to work, and like you said, you have to top that. So maybe how do you fight that? How do you battle that? What are some ways that you can kind of psych yourself into embracing some idea of future success? How do you embrace that? And then how do you not get stuck in your past successes and then overcome that and raise the bar even more and even more and even more? Like, what's the mentality for like overcoming yourself in that way?
Mentally, I feel like the best way to do that is to mentally be more focused on a new success, a success that has not occurred yet.
Okay, yeah.
So if you're more focused on that than the success that you've only just achieved, then you'll be better off, because Your brain's not going to be all clouded up with, oh yeah, well this video or this song or this art piece is doing so well right now, and it's really distracting me from getting my latest work done. Never distract yourself from your latest work, because your latest work is your newest success. And if you think about it as anything else, then you run the risk of it not being your newest success.
Yeah, I see a lot of artists, especially the older guys and the older musicians, in this scene in the DMV, but I'm sure this exists in every kind of scene, every kind of genre you can think of. Even I know some rappers that are kind of like this. And
Some.
well, well, what happens is that you have guys that are like, oh, I had this hit record in the '80s, and oh man, I had so many royalty checks coming in the mail, and I'd get out to my mailbox and I'd open the envelope and be $10,000 in there, and I was like, oh, I'm so blessed and all this, and then guess what? Eventually, the sales start to slow down. Royalty checks start to get smaller and smaller. And
Checkers
smaller.
and Rallies is only going to use your one-hit wonder so many times.
Exactly. Well, it gets old after a while, and you need something new. You need to top it. And it's the guys that see that $10,000 check, and they get stuck on that, and they think there's no way I'm ever going to do any better than this. So I think what you're saying is actually really valuable. And here's how I would think of that. Basically, like I just put out my record, Manifesto, a little over a year ago. I got one more music video to do from that album, and then at that point, Manifesto is essentially dead to me. You'll still be able to buy it on the store. I still got some copies of it left and all that, and I would still sell it at shows and whatnot. But as far as like promoting it and like hanging my hat on that and being like, oh, this is the CD, and this is like my life's work. Like, no,
You're more so focusing on a newer success.
Yeah, well, I'm already in the middle of the next two projects here, which will be announced later this summer. But anyway, so I think that's the important takeaway here is
otherwise you continuously become the high school quarterback who swears that he could have gone pro.
Right. Yeah, you're just living in your former glory days. And it's like, you get washed up after a while. It's like seeing some of these musicians like in their 60s and 70s. Not to throw shade at these guys, because I know some of these guys and I love these guys.
And especially for a new artist, you gotta get washed in before you can ever be washed up.
Yeah. So I think the main takeaway there is, in order to defeat your fear, in a lot of ways, you have to kind of go right at it and replace that former fear with a new scarier, more intense fear. And it's the guys that go out of their way to put themselves in compromising situations where they're the weak link and they're the ones struggling and trying to keep up. It's those kind of guys that confront their fear head on and can face it and own up to it. Those are the guys, in my opinion, that will actually achieve long-term success rather than just having a one-hit wonder and just living the rest of your life like, well, I might have been able to do another project, but who knows?
And there's a flip side to that as well. Like it's not only just the fear or the stage fright, because the flip side of that coin is, what if you think that every piece of content that you've made is brilliant? You think that it's genius. You're running into a whole new game of overconfidence, also known as arrogance, and arrogance is not going to help. It won't help you, and it won't help any of the other people that you are trying to work with if you're working as an artist at all.
Yeah, I might say that of the two quote unquote demons, I would say you're better off being a little bit too confident rather than
that's
not confident enough. But there's
at least a ham is always putting themselves out there.
Yes, yeah, you got it. And it kind of goes back to where we started here. There's extreme manifestations of this stuff that can be negative, that can be destructive. So overconfidence. What are some examples of that that you've seen, either in the local level or in the higher levels, or even in yourself? Maybe, I don't know.
I have been guilty of this, and I've worked with plenty of others who have been guilty of it as well. Occasionally you'll run into a situation where you pick up a gig and you might be on a playing bill with 2 to 4 other bands throughout an evening, and the group that everybody is there to see. And I tell you what, fundamentally a big issue with this is when like acoustic groups and electric groups are intermingling. Sometimes the acoustic group ends up being the group that everybody at the venue that you're playing knows the best. But you're an electric group, so you have a harder sound. You have a larger sound in general. You have a more powerful sound. And
so it's like we're gonna smoke those guys, you know.
You get confused, and in your own head thinking we're gonna smoke these guys because we're gonna be so much more powerful than them. And it's like, no, you're not going to have a bigger influence over this crowd than them. They're the headliners at this venue because this venue already loves this group. Yeah, they don't know. They don't know your. They don't know your group. They don't know your group. They're here to find out what your group sounds like.
Well, just a little side tangent there. You're in that situation. You would be playing to the audience of that more well-known band.
Yes.
So the idea that like, oh well, we're competing and we're going to steal their fans. That's not a thing. That's not a thing that happens. You might some of their fans might be into what you're doing. You might be able to pick up a couple of fans. But the idea that they're going to stop liking Group A and start liking Group B all at the same time, like this is the way I guess musicians think, but this is not the way most normal people think. And
especially if you're up and coming, you should really just be appreciative of the fact that you are out and playing.
Yeah, for sure.
Not over the top. I mean, don't screw yourself over, but at the same time, be happy that you are out there and playing.
Well, also, like, musicians are very big-brained and musical-brained kind of people, and they're not...
You say so.
Well, they're in general, I don't mean to paint everybody in...
Right.
But so, what happens is you're playing to another crowd. You just want to focus on doing the best show that you can because you're up there thinking about your notes and your chords and, oh, how awesome, and... an audience will be able to tell, basically, if you're kind of pandering, if you're kind of dumbing it down, or if you're overconfident and you're kind of not trying as hard as you would have normally been. The audience is going to be able to tell that. And then what happens is you start getting sloppy because you start letting things slide a little bit.
Then I suppose what I would take away from that is as opposed to being emotionally invested in how the particular show, venue, or like booking agency that you're working through is operating. Instead of being emotionally invested in that, simply be emotionally invested in your content that you are playing that night for that show.
Absolutely.
Essentially, just bring 100 to the table every time, no matter what the venue is, and regardless of the circumstances of how you got that gig in the first place.
Another side point here on being overconfident, and this is especially for guys that are super seasoned, that are super experienced. They've been doing this for 20 years. They get overconfident in their playing ability and, oh, our band is so tight and our band is so good. And what happens is this. As soon as one little thing goes wrong in a set and a monitor blows up, or you get a little bit of feedback, and then all of a sudden it's like, oh no, like, oh, what happened? And then then they get shook, and instantly you've gone from overconfidence to like, oh no, the sky is falling. What are we gonna do now? And so being in that headspace of like, oh, nothing wrong can happen, and we're so good, we're so awesome. It's like kind of being in this comfort zone, and as soon as you get, because this is kind of what God does, right? He kind of snaps us back into reality and shows us the truth. And as soon as that happens, you have to be ready for that. So it's not so much, I'm so confident in myself. It's I'm confident enough in myself and what I'm doing. But even if there's a little glitch and a little hang up here and there, you should still be able to keep it moving forward and just not get your ego so invested in these little tiny nuances of playing live. Like if I'm on stage and a monitor blows, like I'm gonna notice it for about a nanosecond, and then I'm just gonna keep playing, and Like, I'm not gonna change my facial expression. I'm not gonna make it. I'm not gonna look over at the bass player with like a stank face, like, oh, what happened? Like, oh, sound guy, what do you do? You don't want to be doing stuff like that on stage. That's just a little side little tangent there that I just thought of. But let's keep it moving down here, unless you had any other comments on that.
No.
So let's keep going. So the last thing here is not just fear, not just overconfidence, but over reliance on emotion. And so this goes back to, if you're rehearsing in a group and somebody says, "Oh, that idea sucks," or "Oh, you got your 3-part vocalist and they're singing. All of a sudden, you get to the hard part and it's kind of gets off a little bit. And then, like, what do you say to that? Do you say, "Oh, wow, that's terrible," or are you like, "Hey, let's go over that one more time"? Like, there's a way to.
It's that second thing.
Yeah,
it's that second thing.
One.
It's definitely not that first thing.
Not A. That would be B. So there's ways to not like get overly emotionally invested in.
And that's difficult not to do. I mean, honestly, let's think about where anybody in any kind of musical group is coming from. Everybody has some sort of emotion invested in what you're coming out with.
Especially in music. Sure.
Yeah. I mean, Purdue probably cares about what quality of chickens they're putting out there in the grocery stores. You know what I'm saying?
I thought you were gonna go into the
I went for an industry thing.
Okay.
Like, I digress. My main point is just that, like, if you are engaging in something that you are trying to put out to the general public and you are trying to sell, then you care about the quality of it. So yes, you obviously need to have a little bit of emotion. You have to have a lot of emotion about the product that you are putting out there, which you are doing as an artist. But if you end up getting way too wrapped up in that emotion, you might lose sight of the product that you are actually trying to put out.
Yeah, like I remember way back in the day, me and a friend of mine had done a gig with this artist guy, this singer-songwriter type dude. And I'm pretty sure this was his first ever like live performance gig. At least it was definitely his.
I can't wait for this.
It was definitely
I haven't heard this one.
It was definitely his first time like doing like a solo show just about him. I'm not naming any names here.
Okay.
So it was like he was.
God, I wish you would.
He was kind of green. I don't think you know this guy. He's not from this city, which will remain unnamed. But so what happened was, you know, we had, I think, one rehearsal, and the guy was not a very strong musical director. He was not like experienced, right? So he wasn't.
And you were playing in the backing band that was playing for this guy?
Yeah, so I was just playing keyboards.
Okay.
And there was a drummer. I think there's another guy playing bass or something. Whatever, maybe a guitar.
He wanted other musicians on stage to play his original material with him.
Yes, and he
hired you guys to do that with him, and he was a terrible band leader.
Yeah, well, what happened was
rather,
turned
because we're being
into,
nice. We're being nice about it.
It didn't have to come to this, but it turned into something that ended up being kind of embarrassing for this guy, because, like I said, one rehearsal, not an experienced guy, so not like totally aware of like, oh, this band is like totally solid on that. He's just kind of like, okay, that's good enough. So we might do a show later on how to address that in a rehearsal. Go watch our how to be productive in rehearsal video from last week. But anyway, so what happened is, you know, a couple little things happened on the stage. It wasn't exactly like the guy wanted it to happen. Here's the other thing. He was getting so fancy with it and so complicated with it. He wanted to like, okay, then the drummer's going to start and we're going to dim the lights. And then, okay, well, then I want this little guitar riff to come in, but like really
he was trying to run all of his AV in his head.
It was all of this crazy stuff. And I know we're going to play backing tracks on the laptop. He had no idea what he was doing. And so it obviously turned into a total train wreck. And instead of playing it off and just singing the song and ending it and moving on to the next one, like this guy has a total freak out, a complete meltdown on the stage
Ooh.
and starts bawling and crying and like shaking his fists and like, you guys didn't play it like I wanted you to, and all this kind of. It's like, well, dude, you're the music director. It's your job to show us that.
He did
in
this
the
on
rehearsal.
stage?
This happened on stage. Yeah,
I'm so glad that I was not here for this. I would have made this so much worse.
You would have been heckling him and stuff.
Absolutely. Yes.
Well, because the band was just looking around like.
No, I probably would have heckled you specifically.
Well,
like, just the only guy who was doing their job properly. I would have heckled that guy.
Well, it's like we weren't. We didn't play it right. That's the thing. We made mistakes.
Okay,
but,
so
but
there
you
was.
have to be ready for that. You can't just.
He wasn't quick on his feet with it.
Yeah, you can't have a meltdown and like advertise to the whole world like, oh, you guys like ruined my song, and he's like literally like verbally accosting us on the stage.
And that is when the inner
bandstand.
demon of emotion has bested you on that day.
Yes, it completely took this guy over.
If it takes away from your show, then it's gone.
Well, as a result, I haven't done any other stuff
Well,
with
yeah,
the guy
I didn't think
because
you would work with this guy a second time unless it was for entertainment value.
I just think for him specifically, and it's the last thing I'll say on this, for him specifically, maybe music wasn't the path for him. So yeah, like if you're an actor or if you're a voice actor or something or a comedian, maybe that's a better profession for like really honing your emotions and controlling that and like letting it take you over. But for this situation, that just stood out to me as a quintessential example of just being overtaken by emotion and just the ego, this guy just totally shut down. So you want to avoid that by again not being totally robotic. Get your emotions involved in there, but let your emotions work for you. Don't be a slave to your emotions and don't get stuck in your head. That's the last little point here.
Because at the same time, you have this is all part of the internal demons that you're dealing with before engaging in a performance. There's also a very broad spectrum of external demons that you're going to have to deal with as well.
Sure.
So the sooner you get the internal ones in check, the sooner you can actually like conquer the external ones that are completely out of your control.
Yeah, so once you get out
which
of your
you know
head,
a little bit more about that. This is your channel that we're broadcasting on right now, and you're very active on YouTube and everything like that. So you're familiar with a lot of like the terms and agreements and just the rules and regulations that you have to follow in order to put content out, in order to spread your own message through your artistry. There are a bunch of jumps and hurdles that you have to go through in order to put that out properly. So elaborate a little bit more on that. Like what are some of the things that you've had to deal with, or not even necessarily you, but even other people that do the same kind of stuff that we do.
Well, yeah, so I'm going to get into that, and we got some other artists that we're going to talk about here too that kind of exemplify this. But just to kind of drive the point home here, with a little caveat. What you want to do as you start to deal with the stuff outside of yourself, what that requires is for you to not identify so much with what's going on in your own head. So it's about kind of keeping an open mind about things. When you're just stuck in your head and you're thinking about, okay, terms of service now and hate speech policy and all of this, like there's literally things, like there's words, there's probably a long list of words like this that we can't even say right now. No matter how much we might want to, we can't say certain things. Now, I could be sitting here and thinking about all of those limitations and all of those words that we're not allowed to say, and all that's going to do is stun lock me into not taking any action at all. So the solution to that for me has been just getting out of my head, breaking free of the kind of like limiting mindsets and limiting beliefs that you have, because there's still a very vibrant, growing community online of artists, musicians. There's always space for a new creator. There's always room for you. Now, it's more difficult because of this kind of ban hammer, and they're making examples out of people. It's absolutely more difficult, but what I want to do myself is not just use that as an excuse to not create. So there's a fine line here between getting out of your head and just being stuck in, well, I can't do this, I can't do this, I can't do this, and that won't work, and I might get in trouble for this, I might get shut down for that. eventually you're gonna have to just sort of throw caution to the wind and just let it rip. And that's kind of what we're doing here. And again, we're heavily self-censoring this entire stream, but
it could be a lot worse, guys.
Yeah. So so we're figuring out a way to tap into that part of our brain without getting stuck in the limitation. But so as far as my presence here on YouTube, I'm a very strong proponent of free speech, free expression, freedom of thought, freedom of association. I'm not one of these believers in guilt by association. I hang out with Connor McTighe, so I must be this like horrible person, you know. So yeah,
It wouldn't be. Completely out of context. But.
So yeah, I'm not a believer in that. And so what we have here is external demons. The very first one. Maybe not the most important one, but the one that I'm certainly most acquainted with is the demon of big tech censorship. Okay, so this comes in the form.
This is your baby right here.
Yes, whatever platform you're on, there's rules and regulations. Okay, so for example, if you go to I don't know, a Super Mario Brothers forum online. And you're going to a forum to just talk to people who really love, right? Super Mario Maker 2 just comes out. So let's go on a forum, and we're going to talk about other level makers and what's the hardest level and you know who's got the fastest speed run and all that. Well, if you go on there talking about Pokemon, well, they're probably going to kick you out, right? They're probably going to say, well, this is for Mario.
This isn't even the right game.
Yeah.
What are you doing?
You got to figure that part out first. So you can talk about Pokemon, you're probably going to get kicked out. That's okay, all right? We're talking about a small community, all right? A small community of Mario makers, right? When you get into YouTube and you get into Facebook, these are not small communities. These are like everybody and their mama is on Facebook. Everybody and their mama has at some point used YouTube to find a song or find a video or a TV show or documentary. And more people every single year are completely throwing their cable boxes out the window and getting their little computer, hooking it up HDMI cable. You got your YouTube subscription. You can even do it for free if you don't mind the ads. But so people are transitioning away from traditional media onto these more kind of open, or used to be open, platforms. They're more broad range of ideas, broad range of musical styles and genres and different types of entertainment. And you know, you got prank videos, and you got like, I was watching this really crazy stuff by The Onion.
The platforms you're talking about are platforms like YouTube, like Reddit, like...
Yeah, well, just to draw this distinction between YouTube, Reddit, Facebook, Twitter, and like a little teeny tiny like Mario Maker.
This is
forum,
your outlet.
It's a different ball game there, because these are global marketplaces. I mean, the Supreme Court just ruled that the president can not ban people or block people from their Twitter account. So this whole thing, like the politics and the legislation, the government is just now starting to catch up to all of these really crazy freedoms that we used to have on social media. So they're like, oh, freedom, we don't want that. So this is why I speak out so extensively against this. So there's a couple of musicians here that I'll go through quickly here that have actually been like censored and blacklisted. And what has happened is the sort of CEOs and the higher ups and the people that are in charge of creating these algorithms and the manual reviewers of all of the content. I mean, it's something like 3 hours of YouTube videos uploaded every like second or every minute of every day. So there's a lot of content out there, and they're trying to control it. I honestly thought it was better when they didn't do that. So as we get here into these artists, they're trying to shut these guys down. Whoa. They're trying to shut these guys down, slow them down, and make sure nobody hears them. So the first guy on this list is a guy named Ty Richards. And this is a guy from Texas. He's like an old school, like big hair, big beard, mustached, like sort of rockabilly hippie.
He and I look very similar. I mean, aesthetically, anyhow.
Yeah, so I guess he's
lot
of
commonality. No, we're not going to get into that.
But so what he did specifically to get the full long arm of the YouTube social media censorship, as well as they took this guy's songs off of a radio station. They straight up said this song is not allowed on this station, and the reason why was he created a song. I'm not gonna get into super detail. He created a song that was kind of you could interpret it to be a spoof of a certain political ideology.
The song is called "Proud Boy," and then there's also a social group.
Well, just careful because you don't want to
No.
say certain...
I'm not. You got no opinions on it, in either direction.
I'm just saying that
but
phrase.
His song was called "Proud Boy," and there is also a social activism group. Opinions unimportant.
Well, we're talking about one song.
They are also called the Proud Boys. And
just watch the keywords there. They can flag that. So just careful.
He never necessarily supported or defamed, but as a result, he got his song is now played pretty much nowhere unless you're looking for it specifically to look into the scandal that got it taken off.
Yeah. So because it might be interpreted to be in support of a particular political faction,
right? Even though it may not be what he intended,
right?
From the beginning,
he specifically said that he wanted to. He wrote the song to create that ambiguity, because, I mean, is that not the job of a musician and an artist?
Ambiguity is a very big is
to tell the story and tell the truth and let people think whatever they want to think. But apparently, that's not allowed anymore in the 21st century, because the higher ups and the aristocracy, they know what's best for us. So they assume that this guy that they know exactly what was going on in this guy Ty Richards' brain. They've read his mind. They know his motives. They know his thoughts that are inside of his head, and he had a bad thought, so therefore his music is not allowed to be heard on that particular station.
We don't listen to him anymore.
Yeah. So yeah, and so again, I'm not going to go into super detail here. You can go read up on it yourself and listen to the song.
And he's not the only one. Who's the other one?
So we got this other band here. These both in the USA, by the way. This is not in the non-free speech having UK. This is in the United States. Second example here is a group called Dream Machine. Another kind of old school, kind of hippie kind of take. So they're doing like nostalgia type songs. And now here's an example where the music is actually has nothing to do with why these guys got banned. Their music is pretty vanilla. It's like basically psychedelic 60s, like Monkees, The Doors, Pink Floyd type stuff. They got the old school
I'll give you that.
Vintage Wurlitzers and the vintage Farfisa organs and all that. So like old school group. Dream Machine, the reason why these guys got blacklisted, so to speak, is because they did an interview, and I think one or two of the members of this like 10 part group, one or two of the members had some select comments where they kind of gave their opinion on the issue of people immigrating into the United States. And I want to avoid saying certain obvious phrases here so that this doesn't like get shut down, because that's a very real thing that happens. So they're talking about people that want to come.
Apparently it's a thing.
People that want to come to America, and they had some opinions about how we should be negotiating that policy wise and legislation wise.
They took a stance on immigration.
So whether we should be following the law or
it doesn't matter what it was.
or,
the fact of the matter is they did happen to take one in the interview.
Yes,
simply because they took one. Period. They ended up getting blacklisted.
Well, they took a position that wasn't the exact position that the political higher-ups wanted them, or their record label higher-ups wanted them.
Yeah, the higher-ups in their record label.
So these guys get dropped from their label, okay? The entire band, all of their albums, they get deleted from this label. And this is not like a big, we're not talking about like RCA Records or like Sony ATV.
Which, sidebar, it ended up being great publicity for their album.
Well, that's what I was going to say next,
mean,
is that these guys got dropped from their label. Okay, initially took a hit in their sales because that's their label is responsible for their publicity and for their distribution and all that. And so they get dropped from the label, right? And what happens is then you have the other kind of political-minded folks in the media who might be more sympathetic to their views. All of a sudden, they bring them on to do more interviews and more interviews and more interviews about not their political opinions, but about how they're being censored for their political opinions. So now the story is not, oh, this band has an evil viewpoint. Now the story is, this band is being blacklisted and being kicked off of their label because they have their own opinion and they have their own thought that doesn't line up with the mainstream thought. And again, just
based off of some overall benign comment
well,
that was made in an interview.
Yeah, and I'm not backing up or supporting any of their individual
That's why
comments.
I called it benign.
You can go look it up for yourself. We're not going to support them or talk about how they're right or wrong. I don't care whether they're right or wrong. They should be able to have whatever opinion they want. They should be able to think whatever they want. And what we're talking about here on a broader scale is thought policing. That's all it comes down to. It's, okay, these guys had a thought that we don't agree with. We're going to like slam them and make a big example out of it, make a big stink about it. So all the other bands on our label they're going to think twice now about having their own opinion on this topic. But as you said, it worked to the exact opposite effect of what the label intended. They wanted to sweep these guys under the rug and make them disappear, when in fact they were doing interviews on Fox and on probably InfoWars and all kind of different networks. We're now like taking these guys and being like, oh, these guys are censored, oh, it's political censorship and all this. And so you've taken a story that nobody, like, they're not a huge famous
They got
band.
dropped from their label. They were on the news the next day.
Right. Well, they're hugely famous now for this reason. But like you said, a benign comment, nobody would have really known if they didn't do anything. So you have what is called the Streisand effect, where as soon as you try to ban something and hide it and eliminate it, all it does is it makes people say, oh, what were these guys saying that was so offensive? Now I have to find out.
Now I have to find out.
Right.
Which also, speaking on under the on the Dream Machine story, trust me, everything that we are saying, if you look up the story, it's at the very least entertaining to see how it unfolded.
It's completely ridiculous. Yeah.
It is.
So ridiculousness. You're not going to be able to control people's thoughts. Just let people think what they want. I don't understand what's so hard about this. As soon as you start to hide it, it's going to become more popular. So that's the Streisand effect. The last example here in the UK. Now this is probably way more common, and we could probably do a list of like 50 artists, comedians, journalists, political pundits.
Absolutely.
All kinds of different folks, YouTube creators. Whomever. There's this is rampant in the UK. They have no constitution. They have no First Amendment. They don't consider that right of freedom of expression to be unalienable. They don't consider that. So you have just one example here. Probably the biggest is Morrissey, who is a guy who is, I guess, a pop star or a pop rock kind of guy. And he's always been sort of a contrarian. And so he's the kind of guy in England who says, oh, I'm against the Queen and I'm against monarchy and I'm anti-dictatorship, anti-authoritarian, anti-totalitarian, all of that. So he, again, an artist here who is maybe a little bit more politically activist than most artists, but also a huge like selling artist that a lot of people know. He's a famous guy. And so, you have articles coming out like painting this guy like it's almost like the same thing they did with PewDiePie. And like all of a sudden now PewDiePie is this real bad guy and he's so terrible. It's like just let people think what they want. You don't have to watch it. You don't have to buy the guy's music. I said the same thing about R. Kelly on the R. Kelly story. You don't have to buy
Yes,
his
you
music.
did.
If you don't agree with him, don't listen to it. If you like him, you can listen to it. If you don't like him, don't. Like, why do we have to ban somebody and then prevent other people from having the right to engage with it and listen to it? Like, you make that decision for yourself. That's on you. So if unless you, like he's an anti-capitalist, he's an anti-monarchist. So if there's any other comments you have to say about that on the tech side of things, other than that, we have Frank Zappa as well. Back in the 90s, the late 80s, I believe, 90s, Frank Zappa was one of the guys that was fighting back against I think it was
the parental advisory label.
Yes,
that was being put on albums.
FTC or something. One of these.
The FCC.
FCC. Yeah, one of these bureaucracies that's like, oh well, Frank Zappa's record has some suggestive content.
Actually,
in it,
that
so.
story actually all started over. I believe it was Twisted Sister's album. I mean, hair metal rampant at the time.
Right.
And they came out with the album that had like We're Not Gonna Take It on there. And they had one or two songs that, I don't know, maybe they dropped like an F-bomb or an S-bomb or whatever on the on the record, and they insisted that they were going to pull it from the shelves entirely. And Frank Zappa was one of the ones who went to the Supreme Court and testified to the Supreme Court, at the very least, stating that there was nothing in the Constitution that should be preventing the artist from financing an album to be put on the shelves for people to make the decision of whether or not they are going to buy it. And the only compromise that the judicial system made on that case was that, okay, fine, we will put it on the shelves, but we're putting the parental advisory label on it. So that's for, by the way, sidebar, that is why the parental advisory label is on a lot of CDs these days.
Yeah, and I think that's something that people can live with. That
at least you still get the content then.
Yes,
you still get the album. You still get to see and or listen to what you originally wanted to experience.
Yeah, it's kind of like a soft censorship in a way, but at least it's there. At least you can still make the decision to buy it. And I think taking it off the shelves, like I was saying a second ago, the rights of the musician to create that is one thing. You have to consider the right that the store has to sell it or not want to sell it. But the most important right, in my opinion, is neither of those. It's the right of the fans of that music and the audience to be able to go in and buy it if they so choose. So by removing it, you're removing everybody else's freedom to listen to it if they want to. Okay? And one of the big points Zappa made on this whole story was, it's kind of up to the parents. Like, if you don't want your 7-year-old listening to a super inappropriate, rap song or hair metal song or whatever,
make sure they don't throw it in your shopping cart.
Yeah, exactly.
And then just go buy it for them without knowing what you're actually purchasing.
Well, today I think a more modern example would be keep track of what your kids are doing on the internet. Because one thing you see a lot is, parents.
Well, they got all those automatic blockers and stuff like that now.
Right, but
parents
are they actually using that? So the parents pitch the kid the iPad.
It's easier to do that now.
You don't know what they're doing,
and also harder because there's more content out there.
Well, you can definitely. There's child protection, but you have to use it. You have to actually put it on. So it's up to the parents still. Nobody's going to do that for you. It's not the government's job to make sure you're doing your job as a parent. It's not the government's job to make sure that with the music you're listening to doesn't have a cuss word in it. It's just not. That's your job. It's your responsibility. So with great freedom comes great responsibility, right? There you go. So external demons, right? So we got the censorship from the tech companies. You got the censorship from the government directly on musicians and artists. Like, how do you fight back against this? Before we get to the next thing, how do you fight this? Because I think the example we talked about with Dream Machine, doing the interviews and standing on principle and not backing down and not bending over and bending the knee to the censors, to the thought police, How do you do that? What's a way
Well,
you
I
can
think
do
you.
that
I
as an
think.
artist?
I think that you just described how to do that. I mean, if it all comes down to, I mean, how much do you really care about your opinion? Like, you're
Right.
like your.
Is it worth being the hill that you're gonna die on?
Yeah,
You know?
you're, absolutely. I mean, you're discussing just standing your ground, and if it's an opinion that's worth that, then you know, absolutely stand by your words. Like definitely, there's some book that I read. I think it's like a self-help book or something like that. But the very first thing that it says is be impeccable with your word. So it's basically stating like don't go and just start putting statements out there that if somebody calls BS on it, then you just renege on the statement just because you don't want to sound too controversial. If you genuinely believe in the opinion that you just put forth, then go ahead and stick with it. Even if that's like a song, or like if you're like a comedian out there like on the stage doing a comedy bit, it's not going to be gold in every city that you do it in,
Right.
but absolutely stick by your guns. At the very least, you got to stick by your guns, but know what guns are worth sticking by. Not you don't necessarily want some things are just not worth it.
Well, like for example, I don't know that we should be looking to some hippie throwback psychedelic rock band for our immigration policy, but I don't think that they should be censored for having an opinion on that. Now, if I was them, maybe I don't know if I would have phrased it quite that way. But you're talking about musicians, artists, creative type people. Their job is to think outside the box. Their job is to go beyond what is considered the like normal, like inside the box, inside the Overton window. And your job as an artist is to not be afraid of that, not let that control you. So the next few external demons here, rounding out to the end of our little outline here, the obsession with money. Okay, so this we kind of discussed a little bit when we were brainstorming here.
I kind of still thought that it was an internal demon.
Yeah, because you're talking about an obsession, but it's also an obsession.
But it's with a tangible thing, as Owen so eloquently pointed out to me.
So money is something that's outside of yourself. It's something you go to get. Like you can't make yourself richer by just thinking richer. Like fake it till you make it only works up until the point where you actually create a product and a service that people are willing to pay for. At that point, you've made it. But until you've made it, there's like just faking it is not going to really get you paid. So it's I think this like trick that people play in their heads. It's like this double think of like, oh, I don't have the money, I don't have the success yet, but if I just act like it, and if I just like talk the talk and just buy some expensive suit jackets and stuff, and drive a really fancy car and buy a really big house, then eventually I'll be like rich. And it doesn't work like that. So rather than being obsessed with the material thing and the money, the dollar, the car, the stuff, what I think what Jesus might say is be more obsessed with your own self-worth and what are you actually creating? What are you actually doing? Are you bringing light into the world? Are you bringing positivity? Are you bringing something? Are you creating something that people actually want? And if you make it, they will come. And so that's the point here, I think, about being obsessed with money. Where are some examples that you've seen either money obsession or maybe the damaging effects of people who are too obsessed with money? They lose sight of the prize. They lose sight of what's important.
The biggest thing that I have seen and have experienced in that particular facet of this discussion is I've worked with a lot of musicians where a lot, and I swear it's almost like a cookie cutter model of the type of person that this is. 90% of the time, it has been a new player being brought into a group, and I've been in a lot of different bands over the years, and sometimes I'll be with a group for a while, and then we replace the drummer or we replace this musician or that musician, and we're bringing in a new guy who is a seasoned player into a group of guys who already know how to play with each other, and like we've already hung out socially, all this other stuff. We know our own dynamic.
You got
And
chemistry,
this guy, we have the chemistry there. That chemistry's been developed. So this new guy is just kind of coming in a little bit blind, but obviously the main goal is the same. Every musician in the group wants success. So the new guy, they're just as seasoned of a player as the rest of the members of the group. So obviously their opinion is just as valid. And occasionally you will run into the musician who is obsessed with money that nobody has yet. Like we're talking about playing 3 gigs on a weekend. So 1 gig is some garbage non-paying exposure gig, and no gig is garbage. But if you're
the
working,
dreaded E word.
if you're working for it, then it really sucks when you're doing an exposure gig, because you need to do the gig, but at the same time you're not getting any kind of immediate return. So in that respect, it's a gamble. But the guy, you work with your team, and you guys know which gigs are just exposure gigs and which gigs are, we're going to be playing covers mostly for the next 2 hours, but we are going to make some scratch off of it. So that's great. And then you have this new player in your group that is constantly obsessed with the money. And it takes everything that you have in you not to yell at this person and be like, listen, I don't know how to explain it to you. Either play the gig with us or don't. The money is not... I already told you how much money is being generated to you for this particular gig. If you like it, you like it. If you don't, you don't.
And you got people that are like, oh, I'm only gonna work for this minimum amount of money, and I need to get paid up front, and all of this kind of...
And even in that respect, what's even worse about that, the hilarious side effect of this is these are people who are obsessed with getting paid X amount for X amount of like work that they do. But if you say, all right, fine, well then we can't afford you, they might have no other prospects. Right. So they could have made less money. They could have made less money than they originally intended on. But because they just bailed because you didn't give them enough, now they make no money because they just don't participate now. So
they've shot themselves in the foot before y'all even got started.
Right.
And
so it's an internal and an external demon, that obsession with money.
It's both. And so it's being aware of it in yourself, but also like not coveting other people's stuff. Like this is a big one that I've heard from a lot of guys. And not to keep saying, oh, these are the like best musicians, they're seasoned, they're great players, but even the ones that are kind of novice, that are kind of just getting started out, this mentality will it will not only shoot you in the foot, but it'll pull out a whole other weapon and shoot you in the other foot, and then it'll take a baseball bat to the forehead. And this mentality goes like this: well, we're such a great group, or I'm so great as a musician, and I'm better than Drake, or I'm better than what's a band, U2, or 311, or our band
group
is better than that.
Band.
We should be more successful than them. We deserve that money. And no, you don't deserve anything until you prove it to the people. You got to prove it. You got to get your social proof. You got to get your albums out there. You got to get your store. You got to actually lay a groundwork and lay a foundation in order for that to happen. That's why these groups are there, even though they might not even be as good of a musician as you. And so, like, I saw a Glenn Fricker video about music is not a meritocracy, right? But in my opinion, music is not a meritocracy. However, the music business absolutely is a meritocracy, because there's so many different little subtle things that you have to learn as a musician to be able to get that dollar from your fan's pocket into your pocket and make sure that your
I'll
music
agree with that.
gets to them in an efficient manner. And just to make that transition, it sounds easy. Like you could just hit a button and make it happen. But guess what? You have to design the platform.
It sounds easy when you say it nonchalantly into a microphone like that.
You have to create the platform where the button is there, and you have to write on the button, click here to buy. You have to design the whole thing from the ground up yourself, or get some big record label to do it for you, and I'll take 99% of that money. So a better way to do it is just educate yourself on the business, and then you can actually survive and thrive on your merit as an artist, as opposed to just being this pie in the sky, like, oh, well, we're so much better at playing our instruments. Why don't we have a 50-person team handling our PR and publicity and marketing and promotion? Well, because you haven't hired those 50 people on your team, or you're not making enough money to hire those.
Right.
So you got to, before you get to that point where you're like coveting another group's success, you got to do some soul searching within yourself and find out, is this really something you want to do? Because if all you're doing it for is the money, and you're not actually getting any fulfillment out of just being a musician, and you're not enjoying that process, you're not enjoying that like struggle and that challenge. I don't want to use the word journey, that's kind of overused, but you're enjoying that. You're enjoying that lack of comfort. You're enjoying that fire, that difficulty, and if you don't enjoy that, if that discourages you and that makes you like a sourpuss, this is definitely not the business for you. But we don't want to be discouraging people from achieving their dreams in this podcast. But we do want to have people be realistic about what they can actually achieve. So that's obsession with money. The last thing I'll say on that is there's a lot of guys that will make a lot of money, and just because you have a lot of money does not mean that your craft and your art and your song has any value at all. Just because you made a bunch of money working your government job, or selling widgets, doing drop shipping on Amazon, that doesn't actually make you a successful recording artist. That just makes you a great drop shipper, or a great pencil pusher at the federal government. So, and I just say that because there's a lot of government jobs around here. So not to name any names in particular, but if you find yourself kind of justifying a lack of action and lack of confidence in your music because you think you've already made it because you have money, that might be one of the roots to your problems right there. Take the money out of it and assume that your bank account is just zero. Does your studio still have value? Have you still created something that's worth anything? Have you still spent your 1,000 hours, right, mixing and recording?
Right.
And we've spent so many consecutive hours in the studio and on the stage and all this. It's like whether we had already made $1 million selling real estate or selling some illicit substance or something, that has nothing to do with our music, unless we can set up a system where our music and only the music is generating continual money and continual value in and of itself. So that's the last thing I'll say on obsession with money. Don't let the money distract you from, don't let the money trick you into thinking that your product has value when you just have value in your bank account. It's a separate thing. Generate it with your money. Challenge yourself to do that. Assume that your bank account is zero, and you'll probably spend a little less frivolously by thinking that way as well.
Yeah.
So last little point here, mentality to fight demons. Okay. So we've talked about the demons. We know where to find them now. We've taken out the flashlight. We've sleuthed around a little bit.
You know where your little pitfalls are.
Yes. So we found all the demons. How do you fight it now? What do you do? What's the mentality? What can you do? Is there a way you can create some kind of army? Is there a way you can create some kind of team to help out? What's your experience with that?
Well, honestly, it almost sounds counterproductive when you look at it from a legit from a very literal standpoint. as don't consider the other artists that you're going on stage with, the other artists that you are getting gigs with, or anything like that. People that you are playing out with, to some degree, they are your competition. But the more that you think about them as competition, the more that you kind of set yourself apart from being part of something greater. So
Yeah.
it's really I think it's way more beneficial personally if you are making alliances with the other artists that are doing the same thing that you are, because everything is a learning experience. Like you can learn something from them, they can learn something from you.
Sure.
And whether it's music, art, I mean, you know, there are certain stand-up comedians who they do a few stand-up things together. They happen to play. They happen to do gigs at a few of the similar venues. And the next thing you know, they have their own sketch comedy show, and it's because they decided to actually work together. And working together helps you fight those external and internal demons.
Yeah, you got more people on your side. You got more people to team up with you and kind of find out where those things are happening. And you had a story about another band that you worked with. And what are, not just the story of how you guys have met, but what were the actual benefits to that? Like concretely, like what did you get out of that? What did you learn from that?
That was okay. So when I was with a blues band for 5 years, and at one point in time, about 2.5 years in to when we were making music together, we happened to play a gig with this group called Toadhead, and we were a 3-piece like blues Americana style group, and they were also a 3-piece group. So we already had something in common. Which was you know, there's not every instrumental group is gonna have less than 4 players. Most of them have at least 4. So we already had like some little common ground on. Yeah, we got to do a little bit more work because we have less players.
I was gonna say, especially in the D.M.V, you got like 3-4 keyboard players, and 2
exactly.
percussionists,
Yeah. So
5 drummers.
We had a nice little running joke that we could have with each other. And this was before, like, these were things that we knew about each other, that we started clicking with each other before either one of us had ever heard each other's music. We didn't have recorded content online yet or anything like that. And then we ended up playing that gig with them. It turned out that our actual music was very compatible as well. And we could have looked at that in one of 2 ways, because we were both groups that were up and coming in our D.M.V area. So we could have looked at it simply as competition. And if you look at it, if you focus too hard on things like competition, then you run into groups who are trying to like snake gigs from each other, and they're trying to like 2-time deals off of the guys who are the same booking promoters. Whereas we ended up getting many more gigs from being friends with these guys. We ended up having like solid shows booked, and our favorite ones to play were shows with this particular group. Now, if we considered them 100% competition and we had only thought of them as competition, then that would have been a very big downfall for us.
Sure.
And we ended up getting our return hand over fist simply because we just kind of went with it and genuinely enjoyed the process of doing it together.
Yeah, I think that's the best move you could possibly make in that situation. Now, maybe was there anything that you guys learned from them, or anything they might have learned from you guys that would not have happened unless you kind of worked together and kind of befriended these guys? Is there anything you can think of that was like, you know, oh, they saved us a little bit of trouble, you know, because we saw them do this, and that, you know, kind of showed us?
Honestly, I wouldn't say that there was any.
Were you guys like here on the same level?
We were basically on the exact same level, like as far as where we were with our own production. The only, like, now, actually, I got to take that back a little bit. They had more on the production of they had more graphics. They had more graphic content. They had
Now, what do you mean graphics? Like album art or like
album? They had album
logos,
they had
branding, this
album
kind of
art,
stuff?
branding, logos,
Yeah.
stuff like that. And it was the kind of thing where at that point in time when I was with that group, we were trying to figure out the best way to market our group, and we weren't. It's not like the obsessing with money thing. We were obsessing with well, we got to figure out how to get some graphics out there. We got to figure out how to get this, that, and the other thing out
And
there.
then
As
you
far
meet
as our
these guys, they're just like
and-
they're doing it, you know.
and they were doing it, and they were doing it on a very rudimentary level. And for the entire like 2 or 3 weeks that we had been kind of discussing how to market better, we were obsessing over, oh well, if we don't market it perfectly, if we don't do it perfectly, then it's going to be terrible, and we're going to be very upset with that. And then
fear
we
of
see
failure again.
fear of failure, right? And then we see these guys who, yeah, they use these cheapo routes, and they use these rudimentary versions of how to get like their branding and how to get their graphics and how to get their album art and stuff like that out there. But they did it on this cheap platform, and they had a bigger following than us. And what I learned from that was don't worry too much about whether or not you're able to put it out there perfectly, because putting it out there at all is your main goal.
Yeah, I was just talking to somebody earlier today about analysis paralysis. You get stuck
analysis paralysis.
You get stuck in your head like, oh, it
Okay, I
needs to
wasn't
be
even-
perfect.
yeah.
Oh, this color scheme. Oh, that red.
That's
is,
a wonderful description.
Isn't that awesome? And so it's like, oh, you know what? We can't.
I've not heard that before.
Connor, we can't do the podcast tonight because this mic screen is just not the right shade of red. It needs to be a little bit more orangish, don't you think?
I wish it was more burgundy.
We might as well just shut the whole thing
Right.
down right now. So that's analysis paralysis.
Cameras off.
So anyway, yeah, so that's really cool, because what it shows you is, okay, here's some guys that are doing it, and you know, you can ask them questions about this kind of stuff. You can say, what exact service did you guys use? You got this really nice looking CD. What did you use? Oh, hey, we did disc makers, and it was, you know, $7.99. We got, you know, 1,000 CDs and blah 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 blah. And so you can learn stuff by talking to these people. And my experience with kind of working and teaming up with other artists and like collaborations and you know, side manning for them and then shooting a video with them. And so I've worked with R&B singers in this area, and like Gina Rose, Eva Bittersweet. We've done stuff, you know, just totally independent artists here, and you know, I've played keyboards for them, and kind of see how like Gina did an album release, and kind of seeing how she introduced her songs, how she like sang something that the audience might not necessarily know. Maybe it's a single she released online. How does that translate to the live version? How do you arrange it? Do you do it the exact same way? Did she use tracks, or did she just rearrange it for the band? Getting into like how Eva did things. Eva does like some really, really cool stuff, and I got to give her credit for again being one of these artists that really is not afraid to put it all on the line and step outside a little bit, create a little chaos, go and try to do just a little bit extra. And this is the kind of stuff I learned from Eva. We did her one of her album releases, and one time she had just seeing how she did the merch and how she plugged it. I mean, she must have made I don't know, $5,000-$10,000 in a night, just her. In addition to paying the band, just because she knew how to hustle tickets, she knew how to do like Ticketmaster online and get people signed up for things, how to get their email address, build a list. Like I watched her like do these things from week to week, promoting the show, selling the tickets, packing the venue with the T-shirts and the merch and the physical stuff and the digital stuff. And she's like, okay, now go to this website, and here's a thumb drive, and you can download this over here. And now we're gonna play a little video of like some behind the scenes stuff. And so, like a lot of it for me was a little bit extra, like it might have been a little too much. But when I saw how many people were staying at that show for like 2 sets in a night, and you're talking about like 11 o'clock p.m. on like a Monday night, and you got like
somebody who has engaged their audience thoroughly,
like totally packed to the brim, like turning people away at the door. Line wrapped around the entire inside of the venue for the merch table. And like I saw stuff like that as a guy who was coming from a totally different genre, as like the young guy, and I was like, this is so cool to see how this is done on a completely independent level. Like she doesn't have like a team of people like on her payroll doing this stuff. Like she just did it. And I've maintained a close friendship with these folks, and I'd love to like discuss things like that with them, and like seeing how Eva even did her YouTube channel and how she had a couple of videos that went super big. But anyway, it's a great learning experience, and seeing how that was done was a main kind of like factor in making me want to do a new record and do a similar kind of thing with the merch and the special deals and the online store and the easy internet ticket sales and all that. So I learned so much from that that like I would have had to probably do 50 shows and lost money to learn all of that like valuable hard knocks lessons that I learned from 1 or 2 album releases with some of these other artists. So it's about making alliances. If you have a team and a group and a trusted kind of circle or a scene, and you kind of know everybody kind of knows everybody, then what happens is word gets around, right? So when somebody starts getting taken over by some kind of demon, word gets around, and the whole kind of scene sort of jumps in and sort of helps everybody out so that not everybody else gets stuck in the same issue. So if you have that alliance, you can save yourself a lot of trouble and a lot of money. So another little point here about just the battle in general is warriors go to war hungry. So as we're fighting our demons, be careful to not get complacent about this stuff. And you might have already thought, oh yeah, I've had demons, I've overcome that, I'm good with that. But you have to go to war hungry. You have to just not be so self-fulfilled and so self-satisfied that you don't have that fire under you, making you want to prove everybody wrong and making you want to get out there and accomplish something.
Otherwise, you'll start stagnating with your with any kind of content that you're trying to put out there.
Yeah, so as long as you're grounded, you're standing your own thing. You're not overconfident, but you're not afraid that you're gonna fail. You can live somewhere in that middle zone, and I think that's the best place to be. And so what are some maybe rather than offensive, what are some great defensive strategies that we can use? Like I said, not being so fulfilled in yourself, you have to have that fire, you have to want that passion. How do you defend against new demons coming in and attacking you?
Well, one big way, and this is something that you and I have certainly had to deal with a lot. Like the whole concept of going into war hungry. So, like we're making this podcast right now. We have other content that we've put out. You have music videos for your stuff that you've made before, and that is the kind of thing where hungry enough to put it out there 100%. And then once it's put out there, you're hungry to, actually engage the audience that we're trying to put it out for, and engage the people that we're trying to market it to. But if you obsess about how many likes or how many hits or how many shares you're getting immediately, I feel like that can sometimes be a distraction. So
well, there's a flip side to that too, is when you start getting a lot of likes, you start getting a lot of views, you can start to kind of satiate yourself on that and be
you
like,
can get
okay,
lazy.
Yeah, I'm famous now. I'm an celebrity, so I don't have to try anymore. And like I know a lot of musicians, like they won't eat before a gig. I know musicians who they don't want,
I'm very much like that.
you know, you don't want to just be that comfortable. You gotta just be a little shaky about it. So any other defensive strategies? So obviously like fasting, right? Depriving yourself from
fasting.
from
Fasting is always
engaging.
wonderful.
So, but specifically fasting against like embracing this idea of internet stardom and the likes and the views and all that. But any other defensive strategies you have to protect against other invaders that might come in and sneakily try to take you over and corrupt your mind?
No, I think anything else would be just elaborating on that concept in general. Is it like one way or another? Like we're talking about staying grounded here. Like you need to stay in the moment of your creation. If you're not, then your creation is going to suffer in some way.
Yeah. Well, what was it you were saying before? I wish a demon something.
Okay. So we had this discussion, especially when we were getting into the biblical aspect of and the biblical metaphors that we use for this. One thought process that I've had a million times, just being a big baby in a dark room, and being the classic adult scared of the dark, and thinking about I don't know. Like that horrible demon from any movie, even like The Exorcist. You think about being possessed or something like that in the middle of the night.
Terrifying movie.
I
had nightmares for like a month.
Right. So you're terrified thinking of all of this, and the one thing that I've found that has been a very positive way to do this is to just kind of pause and realize that that your spirit is stronger than any ghost or demon or poltergeist that could ever come into the room that you're trying to fall asleep in right now. And as cheesy as that sounds, mentally it works. So I would say that what you could take away from that is apply it to your creative process in the sense where you're scared of this, you're scared of that, you're scared of what if this song isn't as good as I thought it was when I wrote it. If you just say, I wish somebody would tell me that this song was terrible. You should actually want somebody to tell you that your song is terrible. Like you should be welcoming that just so that you can do it again better, or so that you can show them something different next time that's going to blow them out of the water. Like welcome that negativity just so that you can expel it.
Yeah, absolutely. So you're confronting this evil, this demon, this corruption. You're confronting it head on, right? So staying grounded. You have to at some point not be swayed and have your whole entire like paradigm shifted by every little bit of constructive criticism. Okay, so I've played a lot of piano competitions when I was younger. I've lost a lot of piano competitions, and I've won a lot of piano competitions. And at these competitions, you see kids get their critique, and they come out of there and they played a wrong note, and they're just crying, and they're just running down the hall, and they just like, oh, mommy, I played a bad note, right? And so I actually made a video about this on my stage fright video, and just to rehash it very briefly, you have to, like you said, want that criticism. At some point, you have to go to somebody that's more experienced than you, that's better than you, who's way smarter, who's been there, who's done that, who's thought that, and you have to ask them to be brutally honest. A great way to do this is go to your mentor of choice, or go to your person that you aspire to be like, and ask them a simple question. Go to them and say, if you were my age again, but you still had all of the experience and knowledge and wisdom that you have today, what would you do differently? So if you were me, how would you do things differently? Now, the important thing about this is, don't ask this to your peers because your peers are going to give you some nonsense. Ask this to somebody who's specifically older, smarter, wiser. Okay, you get my point.
Somebody in some sort of higher echelon.
Higher echelon, precisely. And you'll find that people will give you some really, really off the wall, really unexpected, good advice. What you also might find is that people will kind of tell you in a certain kind of way some of the things that you're doing wrong, and this is bad, and if I was you and I was doing that, I'd probably stop doing that right now. So a lot of these guys will not sugarcoat it because they don't care what you think. They're already past you. They've been there. They've done that. They don't have to get your admiration. You're trying to figure out what mentality and what process they use to get to where they were at. So that's about staying grounded. Confront it head on. Get that criticism. Get that negativity. Get that honest feedback, that data, right? Straight up, hard, cold data, which looking at my YouTube analytics sometimes can be some cold data.
Some cold data.
That's why this is under nonprofits, by the way. So get that data and learn from it. You can't let it throw you off. You can't let it say, well, I didn't do everything perfectly, so now I suck. No, use it and use it to improve. It's gonna broaden your perspective on a lot of different things. So I think we pretty much we pretty much nailed this topic. I think we've done defeated pretty much every demon in existence, except maybe the one super demon, Satan himself. He's probably still lurking out there somewhere. But I feel like we've given him a good couple of 1-2 punches and a good couple of elbows and a good couple of headbutts in this podcast here. So that's all we have kind of prepared. And then we'll just wrap it up with a little personal segment. Is there any other points that you have to say on this, or any other tangents or side?
No. I got nothing for this.
Yeah. Well, great. Well, I'll just wrap it up here then. We'll get to the conclusion. In conclusion, right? Free will, valuable tool, but you overuse it, you just ignore every single sense of authority, you're gonna end up like Ty Richards and Dream Machine. You're gonna get canned, you're gonna get banned. And luckily, these guys had large enough audiences, and
that it was not a make or break situation.
Yeah, well, they had support from other media companies and all this, so that ended up working out for them. But you, as a nobody, probably won't work for you. So learn how to, bend the rules a little bit, but know when you're going too far. You don't want to be pure evil, like
learn how to work with
Lucifer himself.
Learn how to work within your limitations,
yes,
in order to break them later on.
Yes. Okay. Follow the example of Jesus. One of the main things Jesus is known to have done is driving out demons. He's defeating demons. He's going around fighting all of the demons that people have accumulated either through their own action or through some sort of divine intervention, right? So how do you defeat those? Well, you got two different kinds of demons. You got the internal, you got the greed, the fear, the overconfidence, the emotionality. You lose yourself in your emotion. You got your external demons. You want to, deal with yourself first, right? Clean up your own room, then go out into the world and help everybody else clean up theirs. And one of the main ways to do this is to speak up and be vocal and like speak out against these overlords that are trying to take away your freedoms and our freedoms and the freedoms of musicians, artists, music teachers at large. So, that's one way you can actually do some good in the world. And while we might have like 1 or 2 people watching this right now, at least we said it. We're on record standing up against this stuff, and I think that's important. Avoid the money and just be grounded. Don't let a little criticism shake you. Be like us. We're asking you guys.
Not all the way, but
Well, in the sense that like last time and this time again, I'm encouraging people to push back on any of the statements, any of the claims that we've made here. Disagree with us. Write some comments in the chat or in the comment section once this gets uploaded after. Give us some serious feedback here. How's the lighting? How's the exposure on the camera? How's our cool outfits? How's his hair looking?
Even if it has nothing to do with the discussion topic.
Yeah, of course. Like the more shallow, the better. So give us some serious like feedback here, because we want to keep the conversation going, and we want to not just help other people watching this channel, but we want to help you help others as well. So if you like this podcast and you want to see this show continue into the future, into the end of time, definitely leave a like if you like, and don't forget to subscribe to this channel, Owen Adams Music. Hit the bell. You get a nice little notification for all the future videos, all the future podcasts, all the future streams. We're going to be doing jam sessions this summer. We're going to be doing a lot of recording, a lot of music videos, a lot of live shows, all kinds of musical stuff, educational stuff, and just sort of fun, just hanging out with two crazy musician guys.
And of course, more OCast.
Yes. Well, that's what we're here for. We're just here to get this unfiltered, like, truth out there. And just again, to reiterate, if you disagree, definitely we'll keep the conversation going in the comments down below. So we're gonna leave it right there. Let's see, what's a nice little biblical phrase? We got 1, 2, 3. Which one should we do? I kind of like this one here. All right.
Okay, yeah, it's more finite.
This is Romans chapter 8, verse 37-39. Neither death nor life, angels nor demons, present nor future, any powers or anything else will be able to separate us. And that is the OCast. Peace.
Thanks again.